This video is a basic review of business income reporting on Schedule C. There is a separate advanced video that reviews more complex Schedule C reporting. So what determines if the activity is a business? The two requirements are that the taxpayer must engage in the activity primarily to generate a profit, and it needs to be something that the taxpayer does with some frequency or routine. Business income is reported on the tax return on Schedule C. Schedule C includes all the business sources of income along with the related expenses and calculates the business net profit. The net profit is carried to the 1040 Schedule 1 and is included in the taxpayer's adjusted gross income. Note that businesses resulting in a net loss are out of scope for Tax-Aide. If you have a taxpayer with more than one business activity, even if they are similar, they cannot be combined. Each needs a separate Schedule C. The taxpayer interview is key to determine if it really is a business. If you determine that it's not a business, then the income received would be reported as other income. If the activity is not even intended to generate a profit, then it is out of scope for Tax-Aide and is likely some type of hobby. If it is only a sporadic activity, then there is no routine and it's not a business. Okay, so let's do a knowledge check. Let's consider a few examples. What about recycling income? Well, in this case, the taxpayer has told us he does it on a continuing basis. So yes, this would be a business. What about clinical trial payment? Well, no, here the taxpayer is telling us it's a one-time activity. So this would only be reported as other income. It's not a business. Lawn mowing. Well, lawn mowing is seasonal, but it is a routine activity during that season. So yes, the lawn mowing would be a business. Again, the interview is key to understanding the circumstances. There are several other considerations to determine if the return is in scope. The requirements include the taxpayer must be using cash basis reporting, so they cannot hold inventory. All purchases of materials and supplies must be reported as expense in the tax year. For truck and car expenses, they must use the IRS reported standard mileage rate. Any taxpayer wishing to use actual expense will need to be referred to a paid preparer. And total business expenses must be under $35,000, so effectively smaller businesses only. This slide lists a variety of out-of-scope conditions. You may want to pause the video to consider them. A couple of the most common scope issues involve businesses with a loss and taxpayers that wish to deduct depreciation or home office expenses. The taxpayer may be eligible for a special self-employed health insurance deduction. The requirements are that they must not have access to employer-sponsored coverage, either themselves or through a spouse or dependent, and they must pay for the coverage out of pocket. Taxpayers which would qualify but who are enrolled in a marketplace policy are out of scope for Tax-Aide. Take some time to ask the taxpayer if they meet these requirements. There are further details regarding the self-employed health insurance deduction covered in the advanced Schedule C video. Let's talk about how business income is reported to the taxpayer. It can be reported on a variety of forms, and some companies may issue multiple forms to the taxpayer, so be sure to include them all and ask about cash income. Taxpayers should provide records summarizing all of the cash received. In addition, the payer may not be familiar with the taxpayer's circumstances and may issue the wrong reporting form. The rule is to report the income and tax layer to ensure the income is reported in the right place in the 1040, regardless of the actual reporting form. So if it is a business, report the income on the 1099 non-employee compensation screen so that it will generate a Schedule C. And if it's not a business, then report the income on the 1099 miscellaneous screen in box 3 to report it as other income. Your publication 4012 will cover these situations where you need to change the form for entry. These are what the forms look like. You can see here the 1099 non-employee compensation form. Box 1 is the non-employee compensation, and box 4 is the federal withholdings. 1099-Ks are issued by businesses that process card payments on behalf of third parties. There is no actual entry form in TaxSlayer for a 1099-K. Instead, you'll enter the amount from box 1A in TaxSlayer as gross receipt. And here is the 1099 miscellaneous form. Box 2 is for royalties, which may be self-employment income, and box 3 is other income, and again, box 4 here is federal income tax withheld. Okay, let's talk about business expenses. Business expenses must be incurred in the normal course of business. Note that traffic tickets, fines, or penalties cannot be deducted, as these costs are associated with violations of public policy and are not deemed to be normal expenses. You can reference IRS Publication 535 for additional information. Documentation must be maintained for all expenses, and all expenses must be reported. Counselors must report all of the expenses on the tax return. You cannot leave things off to give the taxpayer a better result or to force the return to be in scope. This is an image of the expense section of Schedule C. You can see the expense categories used in reporting. I've marked the Tax-Aide out-of-scope categories, and you can reference Publication 4012 and the scope document for additional questions on Tax-Aide scope limitations. Only cash basis taxpayers are in scope, so all purchases of materials and supplies must be reported as either supplies in the general expense category or as other expenses. And Tax-Aide is only in scope for the use of the IRS standard mileage rate. This slide summarizes those expenses already factored into the rate. Note, general business car washes are included, but additional washes may be deductible depending on the specific business usage. These types of expenses are separately deductible as they are not included in the standard mileage rate. Some expenses may need to be prorated and would be allocated to the business based on the percentage of the business miles versus total miles driven. The taxpayer must keep records and calculate his business miles. The first and last trip of the day are considered commuting miles and are not deductible. So miles from home to the first place of work and miles from the last place of work to home are excluded from the calculation of business miles. So let's review how this works. Pause in the video and consider these circumstances. So how many miles a week can she claim as business miles? The answer is only 4 miles. It's only the distance from the salon to the nursing home that she can deduct because her morning drives to the salon are all commuting miles, and her last trip of the day on Wednesday is from the nursing home to her home, so those are commuting miles as well. Remember to discuss with the taxpayer to determine any other business expenses that they can report. I will be demonstrating the Parada practice problem from the 2023 workbook. You may want to pause the video and find the problem in your workbook to follow along. Let's look at some of the documents from the problem. This is his Form 1099 non-employee compensation. And this is the worksheet he filled out regarding his income and expenses. This worksheet will help the taxpayer organize their information for you, and then you can use it to complete the tax return. You can find the blank self-employed Schedule C worksheet in the volunteer portal library under Tax-Aide Training and Law. In addition to the 1099 non-employee compensation income, Mr. Parada shows us that he has $30,567 in cash and checks as other income. And he also filled out all his expenses in this worksheet. Further down in the worksheet, he entered his mileage. And you can see here there are 2 miles noted because in tax year 2022, there were actually 2 mileage rates. So the worksheet is breaking it out in that way. Now I'm going to enter the Parada data in TaxSlayer. I'm going to be using Practice Lab 2022 for the entry, so your answers may be slightly different. I have entered all of the other information in the return other than the business information. So I'm going to start with entering the 1099 NEC. So I'm inputting the payer information as Anderson Property Management. And I've typed in the payer TIN, and the dollar amount on his form is $10,978. We'll click continue. It asks me, where do I want this income reported? I want it to be included as Schedule C. I'll click continue. This opens the basic information about your business screen. I don't have a separate business name or identification number or address, so I'll just scroll down. I do need to select a business type. You can scroll through here. I'm going to look for administration and support. And as I scroll, I think my best category is other services to buildings. You can also use, there's a Bogart tool that can help assist you in finding the correct code. Next, I'm going to go to questions about the business. The defaults are cash accounting and cost inventory. We're going to leave those as is. Remember, we can only do in-scope returns will all be cash accounting method. We'll look at these questions. Generally, our taxpayers will all be participating in the business, which is the default. In-scope returns will be blank for prior year losses and for having issued any 1099s. Then we'll go to the income input. You can see here that the 1099 non-employee compensation income is already included. It pulled that forward. We are going to enter his cash income under gross receipts. $30,567 is what he showed us on his worksheet. And we'll click continue. And now we'll go to expenses. We'll do general expenses first, which he has listed on the worksheet. I'm going to pause the video here for me to enter them. Maru is eligible for the self-employed health insurance deduction. He reflected on his Schedule C worksheet Medicare supplement costs of $1,800, but he also has Medicare premiums of $1,979 and dental insurance premiums that he told us about during the interview for another $720. So his total self-employed health insurance deduction is a total of $4,499, which I have entered here. You can refer to the Schedule C advanced video for more information on this deduction. Here is the completed entry screen for his general expenses. I will scroll through so that you can see my entries. This ends the general expenses. So we'll now move to other expenses. In other expenses, we put a description in for each one. We'll start with training, which his worksheet says is $150. Then we can enter another one. We'll do his coveralls, his specialized coveralls for $124. And then his tools for $2,645. So that is all of the other expenses. We can move now to car and truck expenses. He tells us he has a 2017 Ford F-150 that he placed in service on May 5th of 2018. He has given us his business mileage in his worksheets. So I'll enter those as 300. and second half is 358. Subtracting his business miles from the total miles he told us he has for the year, we can see his non-business miles are 8,906. And TaxSlayer will use the standard mileage rate to compute his business expense for his mileage. All right, we need to do these check boxes. He did not have another vehicle. He used this one during off-duty hours. He does have information to support his deduction, and his evidence is written. That is all of the entries that we need to complete his Schedule C. So let's go back to the input screen. And I want to show you from the income screen, the Schedule C option gives you the ability to print your draft Schedule C here so that you can review it. So let's take a look at it now. So this is the Schedule C that we have created. You can see at the top is his income, the $41,545. That's the total of his 1099 NEC plus his cash and check income. Below it are his total expenses of $10,444. You can see that he is showing $400 of car and truck expenses. That was calculated by TaxSlayer based on the business mileage that had been input. And he has a net profit of $31,101. We scroll down to page 2 of the Schedule C. We can see the car and truck information that was provided. And here's listed the detail of the other expenses, which is a total of $2,919 that was carried forward to the summary of expenses here on the first page of the Schedule C. So his net profit from the business is $31,101. Let's see how that rolled forward into the schedules for the 1040. You can see here the Schedule C income has come forward to the Schedule 1, line 3 for business income, and then that will carry to the front of the 1040. Here's the pro rata 1040. I'll scroll to the top of page 2. And you can see that on line 8 for other income, it's coming from the Schedule 1, line 10. So his business income is now included in his total income on the tax return. This ends the pro rata workbook demonstration. The NTTC Schedule C guidelines can be very helpful and are located in the volunteer portal. Additionally, you can review these additional resources and view the Business Income Schedule C Advanced video to gain an understanding of more complex business reporting and for the special business-related deductions. This concludes the video for Business Income Schedule C Basic.